The night, he told her, was over. Rain drummed on the roof like a cruel applause. Anna stood by the window, her trembling fingers clutching the letter he had left behind. No confrontation, no explanation, just a note that read, asterisk, I need more than what we have. I am sorry. Asterisk. Daniel had walked out her life that evening, his shoes splashing through puddles as he drove away with her best friend, Clara, the woman who'd once promised Anna she would never betray her. The betrayal cut deeper than the words could capture. Anna, the simple teacher with big dreams but small means, had been left behind for someone with glitz, inheritance, and access to circles she could never enter. The small town whispered for months. She wasn't good enough for him, they said. Asterisk, who can blame him? Asterisk, some smirked. But Anna said nothing. She picked herself up, went to work, and kept her head down, even when every memory of him passed like a ghost through her quiet apartment. Years turned like pages in an old novel. 5 years later, the world had changed, but not nearly as much as Anna had. She was no longer the woman who waited for love to return. She had built a life so remarkable that even she sometimes struggled to believe it was real. It began with a chance encounter, a conference she attended in the city, something she'd never imagined herself doing, and a stranger who noticed her not for what she lacked, but for the light she carried. His name was Alexander Grant, a billionaire philanthropist with a reputation for being both brilliant and ruthlessly private. Their first conversation lasted 3 hours. Their second turned into dinner. And within a year, he had fallen for her quiet strength, her humility, her refusal to be dazzled by his wealth. He told her once, asterisk, you see people, Anna, not what they own. Asterisk. Now, 5 years after Daniel's betrayal, Anna stepped out of the sleek black Rolls-Royce in front of the same hotel where Daniel and Clara were hosting a charity gala. Her silk gown shimmered like moonlight. The diamond bracelet around her wrist caught every eye. But it wasn't the jewelry that drew attention. It was the confidence, the grace, the quiet dignity of a woman who had found herself and lost nothing in doing so. When Daniel saw her across the hall, his world stopped. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. Clara froze beside him, her manicured fingers tightening around her wine glass. Anna, the woman they had mocked, dismissed, and discarded, was standing there radiant, elegant, arm in arm with Alexander Grant, the billionaire whose name filled headlines and whose fortune dwarfed anything Daniel could ever dream of. Alexander leaned in slightly, his hand resting protectively on the small of her back. Darling, are these friends of yours? Anna smiled politely. Acquaintances, she replied softly, her voice calm, but her eyes told another story, one that spoke of betrayal, survival, and victory without vengeance. Daniel tried to speak, his words stumbling out. Anna, you look, it's been so long. Yes, she said, her tone kind but distant. 5 years, I believe. Clara forced a smile, her eyes scanning Alexander from head to toe. We were just surprised to see you. You look different. Alexander chuckled lightly. She tend to have that effect on people, he said, his voice smooth, proud. My wife has that rare kind of grace that doesn't fade. Daniel's heart sank. Wife. Every muscle in his body tightened as he realized what he had lost. Not just a woman, but a soul that could have made his world whole. Anna turned slightly, glancing toward the ballroom. It was good seeing you both, she said gently. I wish you all the best. As she walked away, hand in hand with Alexander, Daniel felt the ground shift beneath him. He tried to smile, to recover his composure, but the truth gnawed at him. He had traded gold for glitter, and now the glitter had dulled. Clara, sensing his silence, whispered sharply, Don't tell me you still think about her. Daniel didn't answer. His eyes followed Anna's silhouette as she disappeared into the crowd. The woman he once left behind now living a life he could only envy. But fate, it seemed, wasn't quite done weaving its threads around their lives. Because that night, as the gala continued, an announcement echoed to the hall that would change everything. Not just for Anna, but for Daniel and Clara as well. The host stepped up to the microphone, smiling. Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin tonight's program, we'd like to honor a remarkable woman, someone whose foundation has transformed lives across the country. Please welcome our special guest, Mrs. Anna Grant. The applause thundered. Daniel froze, his eyes wide, as Anna ascended the stage, the very stage where Clara had planned to receive her own recognition. And as Anna began to speak, her voice carried across the hall, calm yet powerful. 5 years ago, she began, I lost everything I thought mattered: love, trust, security. But sometimes life takes away what blinds you, only to give you the clarity to see what truly matters. The crowd listened, transfixed, and Daniel, the man who had once broken her, felt each word pierce through him like glass. The night wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. The air inside the ballroom seemed to hum with quiet awe as Anna spoke. Her words weren't rehearsed or overly polished. They flowed from her heart, effortlessly drawing every ear, every gaze toward her. Alexander stood near the edge of the stage, his expression calm but proud, his eyes never leaving her. He'd seen her blossom from the woman who once doubted her worth into the force of nature, who now held 1,000 people silent in admiration. When I thought I had nothing left, Anna continued, her voice steady, I realized something important. Sometimes loss isn't the end. It's an invitation to rebuild. Her hand brushed lightly against the edge of the podium, her wedding ring glinting under the light. I began again, not because I wanted revenge, not because I wanted to prove anyone wrong, but because I needed to prove to myself that I could stand even when the ground beneath me gave way. There was a ripple of applause, gentle but sincere. Clara shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her painted smile stiff. Daniel, beside her, looked hollow, as if someone had carved the air right out his chest. He couldn't tear his gaze away. Anna's eyes scanned the crowd, and for a fleeting second, they landed on Daniel. She didn't flinch, didn't smirk. She simply held his gaze long enough for him to feel the weight of everything he'd thrown away. Then she turned back to the audience. The foundation we built, she went on, started with one idea, that no woman should have to feel like her worth depends on who loves her or who leaves her. That strength, kindness, and dignity can rebuild lives far beyond what heartbreak ever took. The applause grew louder now, and Alexander, watching from the sidelines, smiled faintly. He had known she was remarkable the first day they met, but seeing her now, radiant, poised, fearless, reminded him how extraordinary she truly was. Daniel's hands trembled against the tablecloth. He leaned forward, whispering under his breath, She built all this after everything? Clara didn't respond. Her eyes darted to the other guests, to the murmurs spreading through the room. She could feel the shift. People were talking about Anna, about her elegance, her success. The spotlight that Clara had so carefully cultivated for herself was slipping away, redirected toward the woman she once pitied. After the speech, as the audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation, Anna smiled humbly and stepped down. Alexander took her hand and kissed it softly, murmuring something only she could hear. She nodded, her eyes shining, and together they began to move toward the mingling crowd. Daniel couldn't stop himself. Before Clara could grab his arm and hold him back, he was already standing, his chair scraping loudly against the marble floor. He crossed the room, his pulse hammering in his ears. "Anna," he called out, his voice barely steady. She turned, and in that moment, the world seemed to shrink down to just the two of them. "Daniel," she said quietly, her tone calm but cool. "It's been a long time." He nodded awkwardly, his throat dry. I didn't know you were. I had no idea you'd come this far." "I imagine you didn't," she replied, her lips curving into a faint, polite smile. Alexander watched him beside her, his expression unreadable, though his posture was subtly protective, a silent reminder that she was no longer the woman Daniel could wound. "I made mistakes," Daniel blurted, his words spilling out faster than he intended. "You didn't deserve how I left things. I was stupid. I thought I wanted more, but I didn't realize what I already had." Anna looked at him steadily. "Daniel," she said softly, "you wanted a different life. You got it. We all make choices." Claire appeared behind him, her heels clicking sharply as she approached. Her smile was thin, brittle. "Anna, darling," she said, her voice dripping with false warmth. "That was such an inspiring speech. I didn't realize you'd become such a success." Anna tilted her head slightly. People grow, Clara, even without permission. The subtle sting of her words left Clara momentarily speechless. Alexander gave a faint nod, as if approving the quiet dignity with which Anna handled them both. Daniel looked like he wanted to say more, but before he could, one of the event organizers approached, smiling brightly. "Mrs. Grant, the media would love a quick photo with you and Mr. Grant, if you have a moment." "Of course," Anna said smoothly, her eyes never leaving Daniel's. "Excuse us." As she turned to go, Daniel reached out slightly, his hand almost brushing her arm, but he stopped himself. She didn't flinch, didn't look back. Alexander placed his hand on her waist as they walked toward the photographers, the flashlights flickering like stars around them. Daniel stood frozen, his mind spinning. The sound of the cameras, the laughter, the applause, all of it felt distant. Clara muttered something beside him, but he didn't hear it. He could only see Anna, smiling, confident, untouchable. Later that night, after most guests had drifted away and the ballroom lights had dimmed, Daniel found himself wandering near the terrace. The city lights glittered beyond the glass doors, and a cool breeze slipped through the open archway. He didn't know why he went there, maybe to clear his head, maybe to chase a ghost. He stopped when he saw her standing there, Anna, alone, looking out over the skyline. For a moment, he thought about turning back, but something in him, pride, regret, longing, pushed him forward. "You always like the view from high places," he said quietly. Anna turned, the soft wind playing with a strand of her hair. "I still do," she replied, her voice calm. "I didn't come to ruin your night," he said, his tone low. "I just needed to say it properly. I was wrong. About you. About everything." She looked at him for a long moment. "People change, Daniel, but some lessons come too late." "I know," he admitted. "When I left, I thought love was about having more money, more excitement, more everything. But you were the only real thing I ever had." Anna's gaze softened, but only for a heartbeat. "You don't owe me this confession," she said gently. We both moved on. "Did you ever hate me?" he asked suddenly, his voice cracking slightly. She hesitated, her eyes distant. "No," she said finally. "I pitied you, because you couldn't see what mattered until it was gone." The words sank into the silence like stones in water. Daniel lowered his head, his jaw tight. From behind them, the sound of footsteps approached. Alexander's deep voice cutting through the air with quiet ease. "Everything all right, love?" Anna smiled faintly. "Yes," she said, turning toward him. "Just closing an old chapter." Alexander glanced briefly at Daniel, polite but distant. "Good night, mister." "Read," Daniel said softly. "Daniel Reed." Alexander nodded once, then gently slipped his arm around Anna. Together they turned back toward the ballroom, their silhouettes framed by the golden light spilling through the doors. Daniel watched them go, the ache in his chest tightening with every step they took away from him. He had never seen her happier, and somehow that hurt more than all the guilt he'd carried. The terrace grew quiet again. Clara appeared a few moments later, irritation etched across her face. "There you are," she snapped. "Everyone's leaving. Can we go?" Daniel didn't answer. His eyes were still fixed on the door where Anna had disappeared. For the first time, Clara followed his gaze, and the realization flickered in her eyes. "You're still in love with her," she whispered, her voice trembling between anger and fear. Daniel didn't deny it. He simply turned away from the glittering lights, his reflection in the window looking older, emptier than he remembered. Inside, the music swelled again, laughter echoing faintly, the sound of a world he no longer belonged to. The night lingered like a memory too vivid to fade. As the last guest filtered out and the ballroom lights dimmed to a soft amber glow, Anna and Alexander stepped outside, hand in hand, their silhouettes merging with the quiet elegance of the evening. The moon hung low above the city, bathing everything in silver light, as though it, too, had paused to watch her story reach its turning point. Anna exhaled slowly, feeling the cool breeze brush against her skin. For years, she had imagined this moment. Not the luxury, Not the grandeur, but the quiet peace of knowing she had finally healed from everything that once broke her. There was a strange beauty in the way pain shaped people, not by destroying them, but by revealing what was always hidden underneath. Alexander's fingers intertwined with hers, steady and sure. "You were incredible tonight," he said softly. She smiled faintly. "You say that after every event." "Because it's true every time," he replied, his tone warm, sincere. "I don't think they came for the gala, Anna. I think they came for you." She laughed quietly. "Maybe, but tonight wasn't about me. It was about every woman who was told she wasn't enough." He nodded, admiring her all over again, the way she spoke with humility, the way she carried her strength like light instead of armor. As they walked toward their car, a familiar voice called out from behind, "Daniel." He stood a few steps away, his posture uncertain, his face pale under the soft glow of the street lamps. Clara was nowhere to be seen. Anna stopped, her hand still resting in Alexander's. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them carried years of words unspoken, apologies, regrets, and ghosts of what once was. "Anna," Daniel began, his voice low but trembling, "I know it doesn't change anything, but I need you to know I'm sorry. For everything. For how I left, for how I made you feel. I thought I was chasing happiness, but I only ran from what it really meant." Anna looked at him, really looked at him. And for the first time, she didn't see the man who broke her. She saw someone hollow, someone still searching for what he'd already lost long ago. "I forgave you a long time ago, Daniel," she said softly. "Not for you, but for me, because hate holds you where pain left you, and I refuse to stay there." His throat tightened. "You're happy now," he said quietly. "I am," she answered, "because I stopped waiting for someone else to define what happiness should look like." The simplicity of her words hit him harder than anger ever could. There was no bitterness, no lingering wound, just peace, the kind that only comes from walking through fire and finding yourself untouched by its ash. Alexander's voice joined, calm and unthreatening. "Mr. Reed," he said, "it takes courage to face what we've done wrong. I respect that. But you should know, the woman standing beside me isn't the same one you left. She's stronger now. She's everything." Daniel nodded weakly, his eyes glistening. "She always was," he whispered. "I was just too blind to see it." Anna gave him one last look, kind, but final. "Take care of yourself, Daniel. Learn to love without losing others in the process." Then she turned toward the car. Alexander opened the door for her, and as she stepped inside, Daniel stood frozen, watching as the car pulled away into the night. The taillights faded slowly, swallowed by the city lights, until all that was left was the echo of what could never be undone. He stood there for a long while, listening to the faint hum of the city. Somewhere deep inside, he felt something collapse. Not anger, not jealousy, but the quiet acceptance that some doors, once closed, never open again. When Clara finally appeared, her heels clattering against the pavement, her voice sharp with irritation, Daniel didn't respond. She spoke, complained, asked questions he didn't hear. He simply walked past her, the night air heavy with the silence of realization. Months passed. Anna's foundation grew beyond borders, expanding across continents, partnering with global organizations and touching millions of lives. Her name began appearing in magazines, not as gossip, but as inspiration. From Heartbreak to Hope, one headline read, "The woman who turned pain into power," said another. And through it all, Anna remained the same, graceful, grounded, and profoundly human. She never spoke ill of her past, never gloated about her success. When interviewers asked about her motivations, she smiled and said, "Sometimes the hardest endings give birth to the most beautiful beginnings." Alexander stood beside her through every moment. Proud, unwavering, her greatest supporter and her quiet anchor. Their love wasn't loud or dramatic. It was steady, built on respect, shared purpose, and peace. But one afternoon, as Anna stood by her office window overlooking the city skyline, she found herself thinking of Daniel again, not with longing, but with understanding. She had learned that people didn't always know how to love correctly, that sometimes their mistakes were lessons meant for her growth, not her ruin. She whispered softly to the reflection in the glass, Thank you for leaving. You taught me how to live. Across town, Daniel sat alone in a small cafe. His company had dwindled. His marriage to Clara had fractured under the weight of greed and ego. He had become a shadow of the man he once pretended to be. Yet when he saw Anna's face on a nearby magazine cover, smiling, radiant, powerful, something inside him stirred. He didn't feel anger. He didn't feel envy. He felt closure. He tore the page gently, folded it, and slipped it into his wallet, not as a reminder of loss, but as proof that even broken things can lead to beauty. Meanwhile, Anna and Alexander attended another charity gala months later, in Paris this time. The lights, the music, the elegance, it all shimmered like a dream as they danced slowly beneath a canopy of crystal chandeliers. Alexander leaned in close and whispered, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if he hadn't left?" Anna smiled, resting her head against his chest. "No," she said softly, "because if he hadn't left, I never would have found me." He kissed her forehead gently. And the world would have never found her either, the woman who changed it. The orchestra swelled, and as they moved gracefully across the floor, the room seemed to fade. Just two souls who found light through the darkest paths. Outside, snow began to fall, soft, delicate flakes dancing in the Paris night. The city shimmered with warmth, laughter echoing from every corner. And in that moment, it was clear. Every heartbreak, every betrayal, every tear had led her here. Anna had not just survived her past. She had transformed it into something magnificent. Her story was no longer about the man who left her or the friend who betrayed her. It was about resilience, grace, and the quiet revenge of happiness. Somewhere far away, Daniel looked up at the same falling snow through his window, a small, weary smile crossing his face. "Be happy, Anna," he murmured. "You deserve it." And for the first time in years, he meant it. Back in the ballroom, the music rose, wrapping around Anna and Alexander as they continued to dance. Two hearts that had found home in each other. The world around them faded into gold. Time slowed, and her laughter filled the air, soft, pure, victorious. The girl who once stood in the rain, abandoned and forgotten, was gone. In her place stood a woman the world would never forget.